Let me pull up this next story we have from the Post Millennial. The Post Millennial reports, quote, hate has consequences. Trans group mourns death of Nashville trans mass killer. The second and more complex tragedy is that Aiden or Aubrey Hale, who felt he had no other effective way to be seen than to lash out by taking the life of others. This tweet says, prepare to defend yourself. This weekend has already provided us two crystal clear reasons why we need to be prepared to defend ourselves at a moment's notice against Nazis and fascists. I don't want to read too much more into this for obvious reasons, because we're talking about the lengths they're going to advocate for more violence. But that post outright said this weekend, get ready. And they're calling it defending yourself. This is what they do. The far left extremists go around smashing windows and throwing firebombs. And then when the police try to arrest them, they say they're allowed to defend themselves. Right. They call the torching of buildings and the beating of people in the streets self-defense. That's what they're doing now with this. I'm worried about what's going to happen this weekend. So I would only say if you are in the DC area, exactly, you need to be extra careful, be prepared. I don't know. I'm not going to give any advice. Me personally, if I was in DC, I'd get out for the weekend.
Yeah, no kidding. But why not, err on the side of caution? But I'm going to tell you something. This, to me, the parallels are just, it's unbelievable. If you look at the juxtaposition just even between, BLM and the whole, the justified right to violence that they assume and mischaracterize as self-defense. It's BLM, it's Antifa, it's all the same nonsense. And they hide behind their rhetoric and their rights that they say that they have against everyone else, that they are allowed to engage in violence, that they are allowed to loot, to shoot, to harm, to injure, to destroy communities, destroy property, and it's out of control and it's got to stop. And this is just another manifestation of those movements now being expressed in the trans movement.
Another manifestation of that behavior, I think, is NATO, or the way that NATO's been behaving by putting military bases right on the border of countries. And then if the countries get upset and invade, they're like, dude, you can't put turrets in front of someone's front door and expect that you're the one that's under attack when they blow up your turret.
Right.
Like,
reasonable response.
Yeah, they attacked your turret that was attacking their space by encroaching on it. So like, if you can't, that's just this whole playing, getting up in a cop's face, pushing, or getting them to push you and then claiming you're a victim. You got up in the guy's face.
God, I hate that.
If any videos come out this weekend, I urge everyone to pay very close attention to when that video starts. Look for the editing that usually comes to manipulate how an interaction started between law enforcement. Yep. That's always the first thing you should pay attention to, because it speaks to their desire to push you until you do something back, and then they have the weapon they need.
During Occupy Wall Street, there was a viral video that showed several police officers striking protesters, and one cop was swinging his baton like a baseball bat. The occupiers made a propaganda video where they turned the baton into a lightsaber to make it funny and memeable, and it was clever. And then someone later released the full footage showing the protesters attacking the police first, shaking a barricade, trying to knock it over, and then one person hits the head of the cop, knocking his hat off, and then the cop pulls the baton sideways, starts pushing him back. They start hitting the cop back, and then he starts swinging the baton. They cut that out to make it look like it's just the cops swinging at these people. And the funny thing about all this is they started saying, because of my live streams, you can't edit this, you can't fake it, it's raw, it's live. Here's what they do. They would watch my live stream, and then when they did bad things, they'd remain quiet. And then the moment the police attacked, they would take the link, tweet it out, police attack innocent protesters.
Awful.
Because anybody who tuned in at that moment would only see the police attacking protesters.
There's so many ways to lie to people through all of it, like whether it's articles written, like lie by structure, where all the important information comes in the last paragraph of an article that's 5 paragraphs long. Yeah. In media, whether it's audio, visual, there's 10,000 more ways to lie without actually lying.
Have you seen what Reuters reported about the shooting? Former Christian school student shoots up church and school.
Oh yeah, none of the headlines.
Amazing.
None of the headlines had any of the pertinent facts in any of the main headlines. Lie by structure.
I would like though with this shooting, with this mass murder by Audrey Hale, like just to remember, just to leave the ideology out of it, if you can. It's not about transgenderism. It's about an adult that's drugged up, most likely drugged up, and just made to be crazy by her parents or by her community or whatever.
Mental health issues and perhaps exacerbated by our environment or hormones or whatever. We don't know. but we'd like to actually find out the facts.
Yes, and don't blame transgender people for this stupid woman's behavior. Like, she's a
Right.
psycho murderer. That's a person. That's just put that on Audrey. She did that.
Nor should this be leading to any legislation to take away gun rights, in my opinion, because that's going to be a trap people are going to fall into, because they're going to start seeing this as a way to start taking away gun rights, and I don't think that's the right thing to do.
No, she didn't get
100%.
was she, sorry.
No, go.
Well, I don't know how she got those guns. Was she legally get those guns? What's the story there?
I don't
She
know.
had
I don't
two
know if
assault- two
They
AKs
said
and-
locally sourced.
Yeah.
That's all I've
Yeah,
seen.
that a number of guns were like purchased in addition to the 2 rifles. There was the 1 handgun that she had present on her person at the time when she engaged with the officers who responded to the scene. And there were some reports that people are verifying now as to whether or not there were additional guns that were procured. But let me tell you something, like, if you get a gun, you get it legally. Okay, there are background checks. There is that. The answer isn't to say, oh, we're going to suspend, rifles or guns, etc. It's like the people who pick them up are the ones that are making these choices, that are doing this to engage in that behavior. How about actually caring more about protecting soft targets and children in schools, because this keeps happening, because it is a vulnerable asset for someone seeking to do harm and take life. They're not doing it other places where they actually have armed security and guards. I mean, look at every single instance of this. So when the people say to me, oh, well, this is the problem because the person had guns and they went in there and blah, 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 blah. And don't you love children enough to actually stop and ban these? I love children enough to have like retired military veterans, etc., retired law enforcement come in that would like another job after they retire, go in there to protect children, bring in canine dogs, etc., and harden the target. Then it makes it less desirable. I know this. I was on the shooting team, officer involved shooting team, and anytime an officer had to discharge a weapon and someone was killed at the scene, etc., I had to come in and investigate and clear the shooting. So I've seen it. I've been there. I've run all the courses myself personally with weapons, a simulator for school shootings, for everything, for preparedness for officers to go in. Okay, and that's what we also need to do. But unless we're willing to make these tough decisions and actually decide that children shouldn't be collateral damage, people who choose to educate children should not be allowed to be collateral damage, then you're going to see stuff like this happen, because evil like this is going to follow the path of least resistance. They will go into that school. They will try to take lives. And there's reports that this person went, oh no, but there was somebody there with security, so then went back over, to this school. Like, come on, like, figure it out. Like, look at the facts and stop being like a hysterical, imbecile saying that the gun did it. Like, okay, well, how about people that get on a train and they have knives or they have whatever and they're causing harm and stabbing people, killing people? Like, that's what happens. And I've seen it over and over again for, 20 plus years of like investigating these cases.
Well, you can try banning knives like they did in the UK, but then people get screwdrivers.
Have you seen that great picture of
Exactly.
like the UK cops? The American law enforcement, they stand in front of the thing of guns and drugs, and the UK cops are in front of a bunch of like butter knives. It's a
Plastic scissors.
But here's the other thing. Like right now, they control the narrative so well. Like if you go to whether it's any celebrity that's talking about this, it immediately went to gun control.
Yep.
Immediately. Like within less than a half a day, they were talking about gun control, and the narrative has already shifted. I remember somebody did before, like after Uvalde talked about what it would cost to get armed security at every school in America, and it was like $5 billion or something like that. And like right after we sent $50 billion to Ukraine, like it just proves to you like who the hell they care about, which is not us.
Well, we got to secure
Great
Ukraine.
point.
Is that like one guard per building? Because there's like
I-
40
no, like-
entrances in some of these schools.
I think the math that they did on it was like 3. It was like 3
That's-
at like
that's not
the
even enough.
average salary of like
I
I'm
think
into
3 is
arming
better than 0.
I think
Yeah.
arming the teachers is one way to go.
or we can give it to
Maybe.
Zelensky. That's fine.
Yeah.
We'll just give it to Zelensky.
Or allowing
That helps.
teachers to arm themselves.
Well, some schools have allowed that, right?
I'm not so sure arming teachers is the appropriate response. I think teachers should be allowed to be armed, but I
Right.
think armed security makes the most sense.
Yeah.
But also, there's plenty of volunteers. If you're just saying, okay, this is going to cost this many billions of dollars, it's just a very reflexive response that I think is just, sophomoric. It's not actually smart in terms of actually analyzing what the economic cost might be, versus actually the loss of life. But these are the same people that say it's okay to abort your baby after it's born, if you get what I'm saying. And I've sat in those courtrooms too with Dr. Phil Gosselin, the maniac out of Philadelphia that was literally
man.
drowning children, babies in the toilet after they were born alive. So these are the same people like championing those causes. It's never too much if it's Ukraine, if it's to promote the murder of innocent children and babies. And you know what? Too much money if we have to actually protect our children, in schools. And by the way, like I said, the educators. There's educators there. There was a head of the school where there's someone who's like the janitor, the teacher, the maintenance guy, like human beings devoting themselves. My mother was a teacher. I've worked as a teacher. I've worked in some really crazy schools in San Francisco that had a lot of people that had problems with juvenile crime and whatnot. But there's some schools in certain areas they got metal detectors. But don't be the person that sits there with your abacus and you're deciding and playing with human beings' lives and children's lives. To me, that's cowardice.
When we're talking about gun control, it's a little bit of an abacus. Speaking of abacus, I have one right here.
I know, I admired it earlier.
It's made of jade. Tim, you tweeted out yesterday, should we consider banning people that have history of hurting themselves?
So I didn't suggest anything. I said, should
You
people
asked, yeah.
who have a mental disorder associated with a high rate of self-harm be barred from owning guns?
I immediately clicked no.
Most people said yes.
Yeah, 80
which was
plus
surprising.
percent were like, yes, it could be just an emotional reaction to yesterday.
I think
Don't
it
you
is.
think? Isn't that what it is? It's sort of an emotional, visceral reaction to what you see and getting tired emotionally as a human being because you care of seeing the same thing happen over and over again and you want to come up with a solution.
Well, so the issue at hand for a lot of people is that this individual clearly was suffering from some kind of mental distress.
What do you think?
I think the individual clearly, well, it's a fact that the individual was diagnosed, and I think that's what's been reported with with depression, anxiety, gender dysphoria, things of that nature. I don't know if I care if someone has a mental illness. I don't think Second Amendment allows for you to bar them from owning guns. Mm-hmm. Someone could be outright schizophrenic. There would have to be a due process adjudication, and after due process, your rights can be curtailed, right? You can be locked in a box after due process. You can have your right to a gun taken away after due process. So in that capacity, we have to recognize the challenge. So a lot of people said, I don't think we should ban guns in this way because they will just pathologize conservative thought. And I'm like, well, yes, they could. And then they will create a court system with the judges they appoint to adjudicate this and give you quote unquote due process. So it'll happen no matter what, with or without the Bill of Rights.
Wait, didn't they add masculinity to the DSM recently? So eventually,
DSM-5
was that really?
Yeah, DSM-5 access to diagnosis,
something like that. They added
toxic masculinity. Or something.
I could be misremembering that. I thought somebody said that they added masculinity to the DSM. So maybe at one point, anyone who wants to own a gun, anyways, would be seen as somehow masculine or toxically masculine to them.
Crazy.
So the story was in 2019, they called traditional masculinity harmful and faced an uproar over it. I don't know if it was added to the DSM-5 or anything like that.
They made it the DSM-6, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't. I'm concerned with
we
that
need
whole.
the new version of the update.
By the way, that's the
But it
language.
all
3.0.
centers on the access to diagnoses of the different, disorders that one can have, multiple.
What was
And
the
that's
first
the
thing you
language
said?
way that they get you to. Remember, it used to be toxic masculinity. Now it's not that. Now it's just traditional masculinity, and eventually it'll just be masculinity at all.
Yeah, I don't
All
think
of
then
it
it'll
will
just be
bad.
men.
You
Yeah,
can't
eventually.
use a potential to harm yourself as a reason to strip people's rights because someone go online and be like, "This world sucks, man. I hate myself," and then they'll be like, "Oh, go strip him of his rights. He's a danger."
I disagree. 5150.
Yeah, but you can go online and complain about how horrible things are. They're not.
But a
there's no-
judge has to sign off on a warrant. If you express something, if you present a clear and imminent threat to yourself or others,
Right.
5150.
They can 5150 you then.
Yeah.
Right.
So just because someone is diagnosed with something doesn't mean they are a clear and present danger to themselves or anyone else. So I do think for someone like this or anyone, the challenge here is the red flag laws. If someone can go and petition the government to file some kind of claim against you to take your weapons, here's the only thing I have against it. It's non-adversarial. If someone calls up a court and says, I believe Tim Pool is a risk to himself or others, they can serve me a notice and then I'll have my lawyer answer it and they can screw off because they need probable cause proof and due process before they can deprive me of my rights. But what these red flag laws do is they show up to your house and say, doesn't matter. A
Right.
judge said so. No, that doesn't work. That's not adversarial. The accused has a right to defend themselves in due process.
But that also, you're 1,000% right, and I think it's very disconcerting because we've seen this abuse of process, this lack of due process, and what we have seen recently. Just saying, the weaponization of not only the political system but of the judicial system. You have activist judges on the bench. I don't care what side you're on. The point point is it exists. And you also have to be careful who you get in front of. I know as a prosecutor, every time we'd be like, oh, geez, you're going to get in front of, I knew if I was going to try a case in Norwalk, California, they called it No Walk. Because the judges there were like, oh, hell no, they dropped a bomb on you. But then there was other ones that was like, nothing to see here, folks. We can't even identify the individual here, has 17 aliases. We don't know who they are. I'm like, how about we fingerprint them and run them through the system? Next thing you know, they're boom, out the door and they're out. That's what's happening in New York now. So it all depends. And where you have these like weaponized like district attorney's offices. When I was at LADA's office and even San Francisco was more liberal, it wasn't like that. But now we have like this whole like Soros, like funding to all these different guys that are very like weaponized activists, and you follow the money, you see who's supported, who's made donations to them, and then you're the person that has an accusation against you, and you appear in front of that judge, or you appear in front of that DA, with a case. It's gotten very complicated, put it that way.
It will also price out people who are poorer, right? Because they can't afford good legal counsel.
That's always been the case.
Then you get the public defender's office.
Exactly.
But there's some great public defenders out there, God bless. They've tried a lot of cases, but that's roulette. Yeah. That's roulette. You never know what you're going to get.
You think there's a way to balance out the justice system, like judiciously with according to judges? I think having one judge with all that power, like you're explaining, they can fall. They can,
and also lifetime appointments is another situation with some of them, with the federal judges and whatnot. So it's pretty scary because those people get entrenched in there, and they have these different mission objectives. Like before we used to say Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal was like where all like justice went to die, because they just had such an activist agenda. And then Trump started appointing some other judges there to like balance it out so people actually listen to the cases versus just like rubber stamping no by.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.